And we are live streaming in 3, 2, 1, action.
All right, good evening. Tonight is Tuesday, April 20th, 2021, and this is the Hendrick Hudson School Board of Education meeting. Can I get a motion to open the meeting, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The Hendrick Hudson School Board of Education will convene an executive session for the purpose of collective negotiations under the Taylor Law, medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment or promotion or demotion or discipline or suspension or removal of a particular person or corporation. Can I get a motion to move into exec, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? All right, so for the public, we'll be moving into our executive session. We should be back in public session at approximately 7 p.m. We'll see you then. Can the board hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Can I get a motion to move out of exec, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. All right, looks like we're all here. Are we ready?
We are all set.
Okay, great. Greg, do you need to count me down again?
We are live.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Tonight is Tuesday, April 20th, 2021, and this is the Hendrick Hudson School Board of Education meeting. Can we please start with the pledge?
Please stand as we recite the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Thank you very much. That was lovely. So can I get a motion to approve our agenda as stated, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Does anybody have anything to pull from the consent agenda tonight? All right, then can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so there is one item that was removed from the consent agenda, and that is a donation. The donation was for $200 for the Barbara Katzenstein Scholarship Fund, and the Office of Special Education received this donation. It's to be utilized to pay for partial summer camp funding for students with significant handicapping conditions. Thank you very, very much for that donation. Can I get a motion to approve the donation, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So this brings us to the first of two audience comments section. This is an audience comment section for non-agenda items. Carmen, do we have anybody who has comments for our non-agenda item section?
Good evening. Hi, Carol. No,
Thank you. I'm sorry?
did not have anyone sign up for this evening for audience comments.
Thank you. All right, so that moves us along to our superintendent's report.
Okay, good evening, everyone. A couple updates. I'll start with our bringing back middle schoolers and high schoolers in school instruction. So it's been a whirlwind of the last few weeks in terms of hearing from the state education department, working with the county executive and the county Department of Health. Late last week, there was a webinar led by the New York State Department of Health that didn't help matters. But here's where we are. We are aiming to invite in more students at the middle school and high school level for in-person instruction based on parental interest. We have around 240 families that identified they'd like to come back more often, and we have around 200 middle school families that identified they would like to come back more often. Liz Gillio is working on transportation for those students. I think it's important to underscore that we still have very low in-person attendance. Last week, we had, I think, an all-time low of in-person attendance at the high school. We had fewer than 100 students. And there are a lot of reasons for that. We still are experiencing a little drip and I guess hangover of COVID positive students from spring break. We've had school has shut down, particularly the high school, and contact tracing was significant that the high school had to remain closed an extra day. We still are receiving some notices of families or students who are testing positive. For the most part, they're families who are full-time remote right now. Unfortunately, our volleyball team ended its season early because of COVID positive and the protocols, because as you know, volleyball is considered a high-risk sport, and so you shut the program down for 10 days, and it was just unfortunate timing that program had to be shut down right before playoffs. So we're not out of the weeds yet. We still do have athletic seasons happening where students are opting to remain remote while participating in after-school sports. A little over a year ago, that wouldn't have been how we do business, but students are trying to preserve their season because they didn't have one last spring. So certainly we understand that students and families are trying to do everything they can to have some sort of normal social experience. And for many high schoolers, athletics delivers that normal social experience. So while we still have pockets and examples of very low in-person instruction, we're going to move forward with our plan to invite more students back. Our target date, we met today with the middle school and high school. Our target date is May 3rd. That may move based on transportation requests. That target date is going to be contingent on transportation and to make sure that Claire Carey and her food service team are going to be ready for the increased demand. So the good news is, as many districts, and we were included, we're costing out additional PPE in terms of dividers and those sort of things. While we may be late to the dance, I can tell you we've saved in upwards of $200,000. And many of the districts who bought those dividers and additional PPE, they're coming down. And the reason they're coming down is they're actually a hindrance for many students, that they can't see through the divider or the partition to see the whiteboard. They're having a hard time communicating with a mask on and a divider. So I guess our a couple week delay not only saves significant resources, but some frustration in terms of what students and staff are experiencing, given that environment that schools were putting together in order to meet the mandate. So we're excited about this. The middle school and high school have the list of families who wish to return. They are going to confirm with those families over the next number of days. Again, this is an option for parents. The hybrid model will remain for families who wish to remain hybrid and come in on their assigned days for in-person instruction. Unlike some other districts, we're leaving that option on the table. And I think that's important to underscore, because not everyone is comfortable yet. We still have very significant number of families that are full-time remote, and we want to honor that commitment. We have a number of families who are okay and are satisfied with their sons or daughters coming in 2 or 3 days a week, and we want to honor that as well. So the way that we are increasing in-person instruction is we're inviting families that if they wish to send their child in more often, to just let us know, and we'll make sure we have a bus route, and we'll make sure that everyone is appropriately socially distanced, and we have enough space for them. One of the big changes in the guidance from March to April was really about performing groups, about chorus and band, as well as phys ed, that the amount of physical distancing, social distancing, moved from 12 feet to 6 feet. And obviously, social distancing within 6 feet is now permitted without additional barriers. So we're going to make sure our windows are open and we have fresh air blowing around. We have continually been installing new filters, MERV 13 and other approved filters. We also have different devices that are in main offices and libraries and nurses' offices, and those can be moved around to different classrooms as needed. So May 3rd is our target date. And if you are a family that identified you'd like to send your son or daughter in more often, you will hear directly from either the middle school or the high school. There may be a little lag, and I hope everyone can appreciate that the transportation folks are going to need to build some new routes for approximately 240 to 500, or I'm sorry, 440 to approximately 500 students that come back. But we also have a significant number of families that drive their children, and most of high schoolers who are older drive themselves. So May 3rd is the target date. We hope that that target date will coincide with transportation, but that will be a communication that will come from them directly. So signs of normalcy, even though still a lot of indicators are pointing to that we're not out of the weeds yet. Certainly a number of our staff have been vaccinated. Hendrick Hudson had vaccination day 2 weeks ago this Friday. So a number of staff will be fully vaccinated and will not have to quarantine and participate in other DOH mandates as of this Friday. So that's exciting as well. And many students have reported that they're going through the vaccine protocol as well. So things are looking up, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Any questions about the restart to the school?
Carol, I don't know if this has to do about restart, but it has to go about coming back in. Because I know my school is tiny, but we're pretty much all back in. My question is this: I've had quite a few emails regarding senior activities, and the senior parents have not a clue what's going on, and they say no communication to them. So do we have plans for a prom, a graduation, anything like that? Because according to them, they know nothing about it, nor has there been any communication to them.
I know that there is a senior committee. I was at the high school PTSA meeting last night, and the communication from that usually comes from the PTSA and from Mr. Mackin, the principal at the high school. So I know that there are plans in the works, but it doesn't sound like they've finalized anything yet. But the best thing to do would be to either contact their PTA rep or contact Mr. Mackin if they want details on that. I'm sure as soon as details are available, they'll be available to them.
I think they said that they had some plans, but they had to be approved by Joe. So
Yeah. On April 12th, the governor came out with additional guidance around graduations and activities, and that also includes PTAs and those sort of things. So tomorrow we're going to share that guidance with the PTA officers. I did meet with the high school last week to go over graduation plans. The senior committee, the steering committee, I forgot what they call themselves, but they had about 2 or 3 contingency plans for graduation. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. I'll let Mr. Mackin and his group reveal, but I do know that we have been approved for an in-person graduation, and that will likely take place at the high school. Other activities are also being planned, especially for seniors. Anything else on that? Okay. Before I give an update on the elementary reorganization Princeton plan, one item I want to discuss that I didn't put under superintendent's report, but we're doing a close read on the American Rescue Plan. That basically is the education version of the stimulus funds that the federal government approved to the state and then on to school districts. So we're doing a very close read and participating in a number of meetings around the region and webinars to make sure that we use the money appropriately, make sure it's accounted for, and make sure that we follow all the steps. One such opportunity is the potentially using American Rescue Plan dollars for class size reduction, especially at the elementary school. So we do have some creeping class sizes. The class sizes are under our cap, but they are much larger than we would like, especially given coming out of COVID, particularly at the elementary years. So we are doing a close read. Margaret and Enrique are looking at that and asking all the right questions to see if we could plan in advance now for the potential of additional staff at all 3 elementary schools to reduce those class sizes. Certainly 5th grade at Furnace Woods is high. It's not exceeding the cap, but it's high. And a grade level or 2 both at Frank G and BV. So if we have the authorization to do that, we'll be adding those staff members to the team to make sure that we have a really good and low class size as we anticipate bringing in all of elementary students next year. That's not set in stone, meaning the elementary model next year has not been completely decided, whether it's a negotiation through state ed or the governor. So there's still, it might be likely, there still is a possibility of a remote only option for elementary. We have asked the Superintendent's Council, the School Boards Association has asked the State Education Department and the governor to expedite that decision so that we can start planning now and not on August 7th, which is exactly what happened last summer. So there are opportunities with the rescue plan dollars. It's going to be highly regulated, as it should, for all districts, not just us, but we believe we're going to have the opportunity to lower class size, particularly at the elementary level, where those were creeping a little higher than we would like. And coming out of COVID, that certainly would be appropriate use of dollars if we're permitted to. Any questions on that? Okay, all right. And for Princeton plan update, Greg, if you want to bring up the PowerPoint, this isn't really a presentation. It's just more of sharing with the board and the community how we'll go through this process. You can go to the next slide, Greg. So looking at the threats, there were approximately, not approximately, there were 68 threats. Some of them are no longer relevant because some of the threats that came from the group talked about implementing in 21 rather than in 22. So we've narrowed down the threats a little bit. But basically, you see Princeton plan in the middle is our goal for September of 22. And around that are different issues and different focus areas that really need to be addressed. The PTA, for example, we have heard very loudly about concerns around the PTA reorganizing, what that will look like, how they will share resources, what their structure will be. Tomorrow, our PTA leaders will meet with a representative from New York State PTA to begin that process. So I'll be a part of that conversation for a little bit, but the regional rep for the New York State PTA will meet with our co-presidents and talk about different models, talk about the process, talk about how they account for their funds, how they create accounts in advance of the new PTAs being formed under the Princeton plan, so on and so forth. Facilities, certainly we have a decision with regards to what schools will house which grade levels. We have been having this conversation for a number of months, but tomorrow the team will formally discuss some of the pros and cons of the 3 different elementary schools housing different grade levels. And you see some other issues around transitions and professional development, finances were some themes that certainly came out of the SWOT analysis. I'll give you an example of what the planning process will be. So we'll talk about personnel. Greg, if you want to go ahead. So when we look at personnel, we know that in the top left, we have some action items. We need to assign staff to a school. Then we need to identify which principal will lead that school, and then also support staff. So in the priority order in the top right, we want to make sure that by June 1st, everyone understands where they are going for September of 22. That's really important because as we go back to normal, whatever normal will look like next year, folks will also understand where they are for September of 22. And that's really important so we can use next year, including even the summer, for planning purposes. So by June 1st, our goal is to assign the teaching staff. In fact, that's almost done. We met this morning to move staff based on the HHEA contract provisions. We'll identify the support staff as well, TAs, aides, and monitors. And then lastly, assign a principal to each of the schools. So how we go about this is looking at the bottom left. these are just an example of pieces of feedback that came from the SWOT analysis. So an opportunity is to make sure that teachers are aligned with student strength. And certainly that's a priority for us. Teachers that want to teach in a certain grade level be assigned to that school if it's of strength to them. One of the threats, obviously, that we've talked about and is certainly clear and present is cutting staff may impact programs in other buildings. This is where you get into, we have K-12 staff, right? Reading teachers, phys ed teachers. Some of these folks, while they have been historically assigned to elementary grades, they are certified K-12. So depending on what the staffing pattern looks like, there may be some folks who have just taught middle school or just taught high school, you name it, may be assigned to the elementary school on paper, and then we'll have a conversation about what the final staffing looks like. And you see another example about losing some staff. As the board knows, and certainly for the community's awareness, we spend very significant resources on recruiting and retaining our newest staff in terms of mentoring and professional development opportunities, their digital portfolio that they keep throughout their probationary period. So anytime you reduce staff and have to go through a reduction in force, it is not our rules, it's New York State rules, that goes by seniority. And oftentimes the least senior staff in an organization are some of your newest. So certainly one of the threats is potentially losing people that we've invested quite a bit of resources in. And then lastly, the next slide is really an internal planning document. And this is just a brief example of a meeting we had today, for example, with Margaret, Lisa, Laura, and myself. So we talked about two big initiatives, two big decisions that need to be made. Our self-imposed deadline by June 1st, and certainly will be done sooner than that. But identify the staff to new schools. So a number of steps need to and activities need to take place. Review the sections, how many sections will be needed in the 3 new schools. We meet every Thursday with HHEA leaders to discuss this and other issues, but we'll review the collective bargaining agreement to make sure we're following the process, whether it's by grade, by seniority. And then we will tentatively place staff. We will have a master schedule, a digital master schedule. It will be in Google, but we'll be able to track and identify who will go to what school. So eventually, as we get closer to next September, but ideally, probably in the late fall next year, we zero in on what that staff is. So those staff members can start to meet after school or perhaps through some release time to build camaraderie, identify, the very basic things like mission, vision, and goals for the school, and start to really build a cohesive team in preparation for the September 22 launch. You see very standard who's responsible, some of the timeline. One of the main resources we need to use to do this is the teacher contract that spells out in very explicit terms how teachers are moved or transferred, or if you have a reduction in force. And these are meetings that we have every week, as I mentioned. Margaret began this conversation with the grade level leaders a week or two ago and started a FAQ with them. So this is just a window into some of the dynamics of how we get there. So as I mentioned, a lot of different initiatives are happening simultaneously, and they need to. But we'll have some shared planning documents. We also are putting together a Gantt chart, basically all of the decisions that need to be made, people responsible for making them, when those decisions will be made and to whom they'll be communicated. But really what our focus is for the next 6 or 8 weeks are really the mechanics. Get the staffing identified, get the leadership identified, because it's going to be that group that will go through action planning in other areas like transition planning, or certainly Lisa's going to lead the group on SEL and all special ed activities. Margaret will lead the group on staff development and allocating instructional resources. Laura will lead a group on instructional technology. So by June 1st, we'll know, everyone will know what staff will be where and who the principals are, and that will really kick off some of the other planning, because we need to know who's going to be in which chair and in which school, and then we'll be able to continue our work. So I wanted to give folks just a brief update, because as we had been discussing the potentiality of the Princeton plan, we had shared that we had been planning in the background just in case, and these are some of the plans and peek behind the curtain as to what the plans involve, who's involved, and what some of the resources and timelines are.
Thank you, Joe. Does anybody have questions? Oh, Corey.
I just have one quick question. Will transportation models factor into which grades go into which schools to minimize student ride time?
Probably not. And the reason is, one of the benefits from having our own transportation models, we have a little more control over our staffing and use of our resources, meaning our buses. Our buses are small buses and our vans. So Liz feels confident that it wouldn't really matter what school has which grade level, because all of the bus rides, especially if you're coming from the Furnace Woods area where I live and you're going to Frank G or BV, they're, I think, 1.2 miles or 1.8 miles away. So it may not play that big of a factor. I'll tell you one thing that is playing a factor is, as we've heard throughout the commentary, transitions. And we have the opportunity, and it's really an opportunity that if you look at it that way, about the use of Furnace Woods as a 4-5 school. And Furnace Woods is separated from the middle school by 2 soccer fields. And we really could develop a culture and a sense of a campus over there from grades 4 through 8. So that, that would perhaps influence a transportation model, because she may be freed up a little bit, that if you live on the extreme west side of our district by the river where BV is, she'd be able to model your bus ride over to this part where I live, where you live, Corey, for 5 years in a row, and there'll be some more consistency there.
Would there be concerns then of having much older kids, like 8th graders and 4th graders mixed together on the same bus?
I'm not suggesting they'll be on the same bus. In fact, she's
Okay.
no. I'm just saying in terms of ride time.
Okay. And what about the potential for a later high school start? Is that being considered as all part of this?
Not part of this, because we want to be able to compare apples to apples. I know that that's been a priority discussion in the background of the board, and we wanted to chip away at some other priorities like Indian Point or the reorganization through the cost analysis. Yeah. What many districts have reported, if they do that flip, you're basically just taking your 3 elementary runs and running them early, and then your 2 secondary run, you're basically flip-flopping. It's still the same number of kids that have to go the same distance. You're just changing pickup and drop-off time.
Yeah, I'm concerned only because it would impact transportation modeling, right? If you're going to do the later high school, it would impact how you use the buses earlier.
Well, it
Earlier
wouldn't,
starts.
because our transportation model, we're pretty lean, and it's because we have a number of layers, and there's a logistics word for it, and I'm just going to call it layers. That the first layer, the first run is for high school. The second one is then for the middle school. Some buses go out to grab Furnace Woods, because Furnace Woods starts about a half hour earlier, and then the remaining buses grab the 2 other elementary schools. So as long as we keep those layers, we'll be okay, because then we'll meet, we'll ensure that we have enough capacity on the buses if everyone needs one, because we've got about 14 buses on the road at once.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Joe. Thanks for that update. I know everybody's anxious to get details and know when more details are coming, so thank you.
And I'll flip it over to our team real quick. If Margaret, you want to lead us off on some updates in your world.
Sure. Today we officially kicked off testing season. And it was a very interesting day around the district. We tested 3rd grade and 6th grade today. I also promised you the last time we spoke that I'd give you a brief update on APs. So thank you to Nick for sharing with me the schedule. And what I can tell you is we're offering 20 different AP exams this year. All will be administered at the high school in one location or another, depending on the size of the group. And they are all, except for one, being done on good old-fashioned paper and pencil. Only one exam will be done digitally. You can pretty much count on almost every other day in May there being an AP exam being offered at the high school. So I won't go into the tediousness of each title and location, but they have a plan, and I'm sure they'll execute this without any challenges. So thank you to the high school staff. We'll keep you posted on how we progress with the ELA, which is what we're testing right now. And then in 2 weeks, we go right into math 3 through 8. And then after that, we will finish up at the elementary and middle school with science. Of course, there are Regents exams at the middle school for Algebra 1 and Living Environment, which will take place later on in June. And the NISA-SLAT, which the speaking part of the NISA-SLAT began on Monday. They have through June 9th to finish up the speaking piece, and then they have a shorter window for listening, reading, and writing. So they are coordinating that across the 7 ENL teachers that we have in our 5 buildings. They're a great team and a great support to one another, so they have that well under control, and that is the synopsis on testing. We are also working feverishly with Laura and Lisa and the principals to look at staffing for 21-22. There's some significant movement at the elementary level. And as Joe mentioned, we have some rescue funds that are available to us for gap closing purposes. So we have 3 positions aside from the position that Joe was speaking about, which Enrique and I, and actually Joe, are going to a webinar to make sure we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. We are creating a reading recovery position, which teaches a specialized reading program in 1st grade, and 2 bridge classes, one class, a 2-3 class at BV and a 2-3 class at Frank G. These 2 grades have some of the kids who have been the most severely impacted at the elementary level by COVID. They were our kindergarten and 1st grade students last year when we shut down in March. So you can imagine how devastating the end of the year was as it relates to their learning goals. And they are this year's 1st and 2nd graders. They will be next year's 2nd and 3rd graders. So because the data that we have for their achievement is concerning, I am looking to create really a copy of the model that Lisa uses at SPED with the skills program. So there will be an intense pullout for the 2nd and the 3rd graders that we identify. They'll be working with a teacher who does not only some direct reading support, but also some pre-teaching into their ELA needs. So we're excited about that. I'm excited to see who raises their hand for that and get together and do some curriculum planning. I will pull on some of the experts in the special ed department to help us think through how we go about choosing what we're pre-teaching in the 2nd and 3rd grade curriculum. So that's exciting. And I'm hoping that we will further learn that we can offer those positions to reduce class size, 1 in each school. There just coincidentally happens to be a section in each grade, in each school that is, as Joe said, butting up against the cap, not crossing over it, but it's enough to be concerned as we come back from COVID. So that's where we are right now with curriculum and instruction.
It's like we don't have any questions. Oh, Lisa.
I had just a quick one. I was just wondering how it turned out with the number of students who actually decided to refuse the tests for the ELA that we just took. Was there a really high percentage, or was it, what was that? What did that
I'll
look
be
like?
honest with you that we were surprised that as many families chose to take the test, especially the history of opt-outs that we have in this particular region of the state. We, shared with our families that the kids who were fully remote had no requirement to come in and be tested. And yet we have quite a number of families who have determined to bring their children in, or we've worked with Liz to make sure they have busing on the days when we are doing the testing. I can't give you a number, Lisa, but when we are done with all 3 grades, I absolutely will report at the next board meeting how many people opted out of that this year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Lisa, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So Margaret and I have, as she stated, working collaboratively on many different projects. We've been talking a lot of pre-K. It's interesting because my CPSE numbers, we were at 40 about 2 weeks ago. We're at 43 and climbing. New students are being referred to CPSE as 4 and 5, 4-year-olds into 5-year-olds coming into kindergarten. So, those numbers at our incoming Ks are looking more and more every day. And Margaret and I have had discussions on what do our ICT classes look like next year, our 12-1 classes. So that's a huge discussion in my office right now. We continue to have our CSE meetings. We're on track to finish them again mid-June, so that's good. The mental health team has already started talking about transitions for the Princeton plan. What does it look like? What does it sound like? How do we put, how do we, the social workers and psychologists, where should we go based on our strengths and our, I think, desires, because a certain person likes executive functioning, someone else likes this. So we're going to have an in-depth discussion, and we're really going to lead that with where's your strength and what does that look like? So that's exciting because we're starting, okay, so now next year, what does transition look like? And it's starting as early as the end of December, beginning of January. So we've started all of that planning. Margaret and I, with the ESSA money, we've been able to use, hire an RTI coach leader. So Chris Marino will be joining the ranks next week, I believe, full time. He will be working in BV specifically because that is the targeted school with special ed staff, doing some strategies, doing different types of things. He's actually gotten a committee together to come up with some who do I go to, what do I do kind of things, a little cheat sheet for everybody. So that'll be something that we implement this year. With the money that we have for rollover, we can actually have the position full-time next year, starting in September. So we have posted for that position. So that is something that's exciting to us, and we will use that K-12 next year. So any of our identified MTSS or RTI students, he can help with those processes along the way and be a great resource.
Questions? Thank you, Lisa.
All right, Laura, why don't you wrap up since Enrique is going to be spending quite a bit of time finishing up some budget deliberations. So we'll go to you.
Sure. Basically, in the it's the time where we start doing a lot of planning. So my tech team, we've been starting to brainstorm and meeting with the school principals to talk about how we're going to collect over 2,200 Chromebooks and how we're going to clean them and assess them and manage the damages. And this will be the one summer where we will be collecting this many. So also thinking long-term of what distribution will look like in September and the following years. So trying to organize that. It's going to take a few years to get a clean, organized system based on every year we've been purchasing Chromebooks, but we're on the right track. And, basic tech things, Best Web, which our internet provider was just purchased by First Light. So working with them to do some infrastructure work. With HR, as we've talked about, this is the time where we are looking to move teachers internally per the teachers union across K through 6th grades and manage where people are going. And at the same time, thinking about what that means for a year from now. So a lot of our decisions and conversations are talking about things that are going to impact this coming September, but the following September as well. And then also just we've been working with, I've been monitoring with the state. This is last year, APPR, which is the teacher evaluation system. Because of COVID, that was not a requirement This year, we're just following really closely to see what they're going to be doing with APPR and see how that's going to impact teacher evaluations. And then we're, also just planning for summer. So between technology and all the programs we're trying to run, especially ESY, trying to just plan that out. And in the vein of testing, with the AP exams, some of those require technology. And also we have the ACT exams happening next week. So my team has been working with Nick Katsaris at the high school on setting that up and making sure we're all set to run the ACTs using our technology.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions? All right, thanks, Laura. Joe, do you have anything else?
No, we're good. Thank you.
All right, so that is the end of our superintendent's report. That brings us to our Putnam, Northern Westchester, BOCES administrative budget and board election. Carmen, you want to walk me through this? I think we just vote on. You're muted.
Yep. Hi. Yes. We just need to vote on, Greg, can you pull up the slide? Scroll down, please. Scroll down to the next slide. And we need to vote for their administrative budget that we, that's the amount that we are willing to pay them.
All right, so can I get a vote on the BOCES administrative budget and board election? All in favor of their administrative budget? Say aye. Or
Aye.
wave your hand. Any opposed? And then Carmen, do we have to vote on the trustees separately as well?
I think they're
Yes.
as
No, Enrique's saying yes, and so why don't we just do it and that way it'll
Yeah,
be done.
no, you need to vote even though it's not contested.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I ask one question?
Me too.
Just what happens if we commit to this funding and let's say there's a contingent budget? Are we still committed to this amount?
The way it works, Corey, is that today every school district votes for it. Let's say that one school district, doesn't agree. They have to go back, present it again until all of them agree. They don't work on contingent. They just, will have to start cutting people like we do and everything and keep bringing the budget up for revote until the 18 component districts agree on the budget.
Yeah, maybe I misworded the question. If we agree to this and then our budget is voted into a contingent budget, are we still committed to this full amount?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so no matter what, we're paying this amount.
No matter what, we're paying our proportional part of the amount here. Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
My question was that also, being that money's an issue. The next thing is we've always voted on their board trustees. Wouldn't it be helpful if we actually had like some kind of biography or something? Years and years we vote on them and we have no idea who they are. I don't know, going forward, maybe it would be nice to actually have a biography on them or something.
Sure.
That's all, just
I think they do, Lori, when it's not contested. I believe that they do.
Yeah, I remember seeing them having sent bios on both of these people.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we received, I remember seeing something on it, like we received emails on them.
Yes, hi everyone. I did email you guys the bios on the trustees runnings that we're running.
Thank you, Carmen. Any other questions?
I apologize. I I don't recall that, Carmen, but I will look back. Do we get that every year? Shush.
Yeah,
Not
I
you,
think we
my
get
dog.
it every. I
Not
think we
you,
get
my
that
dog.
every.
Shush.
I think we get that every year, Lori.
I gotta go back and look. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have questions before we vote on the trustees? Okay, so can I get a vote? Do we have to vote on them separately or we vote on them together, Carmen? Does it matter because they're uncontested?
I would,
All together.
Okay, so can I get a vote for, hang on, I gotta make my screen bigger. Michael Simkin and Catherine Liberace. Sorry, I can't quite see the screen. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Carol, in the last board meeting, one of the trustees asked me to research how many parcels in the Henry Hudson School District, meaning commercial, land, residential, etc. I think it was Lauren. So the answer is that we have 5,312 parcels.
Thank you, Enrique.
Thanks, Enrique.
All right, Carmen, before we move on, did we vote on everything we needed to vote on for the BOCES budget and board election?
yes, we did. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So our next section is our committee reports. I know a few of us were in finance committee. We'll be discussing what we discussed there in our next section. Anybody else have a committee report for us? Lisa, you want to go ahead?
We had a Westchester Putnam School Board Association town hall call again today. And a lot of what was discussed are things that we've been talking about in our meeting already. Many of the schools in our area are returning to 5-day in-person schooling for the children. And we also talked about the just the school budgets and, what the challenges are with various school districts for their budgets in our region. And the other thing that we talked about is graduation and proms and Board of Ed meetings being in person versus virtual. So those were the main topics of what we covered today. It was good and useful as always. Lots of great information and learning from our fellow board members in the region. And that was the only committee I was in this week. So.
Are there a lot of other boards coming back to in-person meetings or planning on doing that soon?
The ones on the meeting, there was maybe half and half, maybe 2/3 were already in person and the other third were still doing virtual. A big part of the discussion was revolving around the audience comments section and how they were handling that, whether they were in person, spoken by the person with their comments or not, and some of the difficulties involved with doing that, which we've been addressing here too.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, so that brings us to our presentations and discussions. Enrique, I think this is mostly you.
Thank you, everyone. Greg, can you put the first presentation? It doesn't matter which one. No, that's not me. That's Margaret.
Okay. Joe, which one do we want to start with? Do we want to start with
You
Margaret's
already
or you?
told me.
All right, Enrique, you're up.
Greg? Greg? Yeah, okay. Can you make it bigger, please, so everyone can see it?
So while we get set, I'll just give a brief overview. So there have been discussions around the district's fund balance and what the fund balance is used for, how the district accrues a fund balance, and how we account for it. For example, Last year, we accrued a much more significant fund balance because we were shut down from in-person instruction in mid-March. So we didn't have buses on the road. We didn't incur a whole lot of overtime. We saved on some areas in terms of the physical plant and facilities. And like many districts, they had an additional fund balance, and that money has certain uses. And as we have been talking about throughout our budget process, Enrique has been sharing a vision and a theory of using the fund balance over time and to offset what would be particularly high potential tax increases as the cessation fund begins to dwindle, as the Indian Point pilot also continues to dwindle, and that is a one-time revenue to offset huge potential tax increases. So we wanted to walk the board and the community one more time through our fund balances, what it can be used for, and I'd even say, Enrique, at the end, if we can remember, talk about how the district is audited, that there is no secret pot of money in the school district. There's no secret bank accounts. The school district's audited annually, oftentimes a couple times a year if the state controller gets involved, and the state controller has been involved in our finances because of the shutdown of Indian Point. So while there are many conversations out there in rumor land, we want to make sure everyone's operating from the same set of data, because this is public information and we are a public entity, and we want to make sure everyone understands what we're doing and the vision behind that. So Enrique, go ahead.
Thank you, Joe. I want to start by explaining to the board and the community our fund balance. There's two types of fund balance, what we call an assigned fund balance, that we can use it in any way we want. And then there's the restricted fund balance. For the restricted fund balance, the board in the past set up funds where we can put more money that is restricted only for to pay out of those funds. In our case, we have two restricted funds. One is the repair reserve fund, and the other one is the unemployment. Most of the money that we have is in the reserve repair, out of the $1.866 million that we have. I'll say about $1.8 million are in the repair reserve, even more, and only about $20,000 is in our unemployment. So let's start with the unassigned fund balance. Unassigned fund balance, this year we started with $10 million, and that's because last year, like Joe said, we had what I call an operating income of $6.3 million. It's really not an operating income. I call it like that because it's the money that we didn't expend or the extra revenues that we got. Obviously, last year, because of COVID, we saved a lot of money in transportation, utilities, etc. So in the 14 years that I've been in the district, by far, this is the highest operating income or fund balance that we had over the past 14 years. So we started our unassigned fund balance at $10.7 million. I expect this year to have around $3.5 million in fund balance from operating income. Like we showed several times during our budget time, we're going to use about $2.2 million to reduce the tax levy, and that brings us up to unassigned fund balance at the end of the year of $12 million. For the restricted, we're not planning to add any money to that balance. We're not planning to take any money out of it. So basically, our total fund balance, which is the last three columns, is going to be $13.9 million at the end of this year. If we move forward, I'm expecting to have about $1 to $1.5 million in operating income. But again, most of the money is going to be, we're going to use it to reduce the tax levy. Next year, we're planning to use $5.5 million. The following year, 2.5, 3.4, et cetera, et cetera. And like I mentioned several times, the whole purpose of using the unassigned fund balance to reduce the tax levy is to basically try to avoid peak and valleys and know that our tax levies for the next 7 to 8 years are going to be in the 4 to 5% range, rather than that 1 year 1% and the next year 9%. On the restricted fund balance, we really are planning to use very little, only maybe in repairs, about 300,000. Unemployment, definitely we're not planning to use at all, because like I mentioned during our budget time, last year, there were a lot of fraudulent unemployment money that we had to pay. We contested them, and the Department of Labor does not reimburse us money. They reduce future years unemployment claims. So in general, we have about $5,000 to $10,000 in unemployment claims per year. Last year, we got to about $110,000. And we all know that no one was unemployed because we paid absolutely every person what their salary would have been even without COVID. So in that sense, I'm not planning to have any unemployment, to use any unemployment funds. Actually, probably in a year or two, I will ask the board to have a resolution to take the money out of that reserve and put it somewhere else. But again, it's very little money. We're talking $10,000 to $20,000. So that's where our fund balance is. Fund balance means our savings that we will be using to reduce taxes going forward. This is not money that, yes, we have today $12 million in unassigned fund balance, but that doesn't, or we're going to have $12 million, but that doesn't mean that it's money that we have to pay salaries or to pay anyone. It's money that we're saving because we know that in the future, we're going to need that money so we don't have tax increases of 7, 8, 9%. So I think it's important for the community to understand that we save money because we will need that money going forward. Any questions?
I have one, Enrique. I'm a little bit confused on there's the 3 groupings there on the left. And in the third part where it has total fund balance beginning of year, and then the second line is add use fund balance during the year, where does that number come from?
For example, if you remember this year, look at the 2020-2021.
Okay.
If you remember, what we agreed was that our fund balance to reduce the taxes for next year, originally it was going to be $1.2 million, but then Finance Committee had a meeting and said, no, we want to reduce the tax because the community is still hurting, and we decided that 4.5% increase is the right increase given the situation. That's that $2.2 million. That's up to the board to decide how much we move forward. Yes, Lisa?
Oh, so that is the 2.2 million in that first grouping of numbers. But then
Yeah, in the second grouping, again, is restricted fund balance.
right, got that.
I don't use. I'm not planning to add or reduce anything because it's only for those two funds, the unemployment fund and the repair fund. So I'm not planning to put more money.
Mhm.
I'm planning to take some money probably in 22, 23, not next year. And I just put $150,000 because it's going, those years that I put some money is because those are difficult years and I might need, I might need to use repair reserves. We use it as needed, but I don't want it to, the board to think that that money is always going to be there, and if we need it, we can take it or anything. We use repair reserve some years because we need it, and we don't have enough money in the budget. And then the third part are the additions of the prior two. It's the total, meaning unassigned plus restricted.
So is the 1.275, is that what we didn't spend in last year's budget that's being rolled into the fund balance?
Where are you? The one?
The third section down with 1.275 million, the add use fund balance during the year. It's the during the year. Where is that number? Is that what wasn't spent the year prior?
It's the addition of 3.5 million plus the 0 in the restricted, less the 2.2. So we are adding in total 1.275.
I think I got it. Alex, do you understand it now, or do you want me to try to?
Alexandra, so
Yeah.
the total fund balance, we started with 10.7 plus 1.88. Agree? Then we added $3.5 million, but we deducted 2.2, and that gives me the net of 1.2. So we're going to add $1.2 million to our total fund balance.
Okay, okay. So then the 3.5 million, is that's what we didn't spend last year?
This year, that's what I'm
Okay.
projecting, that we're going to have of operating income, either higher revenues or lower expenses or a combination of both.
Okay, thank you. I got it now. Thank you.
So I want to jump in here and say, how does this happen, right? How do you underspend your budget? Well, it can happen easily. We were here a year ago in a pandemic. Schools were officially closed for the rest of the year, and we were building our budget a year ago for this year, apples to apples, not knowing COVID, not knowing a remote model, not knowing a hybrid model, not knowing any of it. So we had to put together our best guess of an operating budget, given the full liability that schools return and we're back to normal. Now, that's not the case, right? We have fewer buses on the road. They're not traveling as much. And so there are certain things that naturally happen that save you money, because we locked in our budget 2 weeks ago in early April, and most of our spending for our budget is not going to happen until September, 5 months later. So things change. People retire. We hire people at lower salaries. We do cooperative bidding for a number of supplies and equipment and oil and diesel. And sometimes, we budget high and we do better than expected. So having a fund balance at the end of the year is a good thing. What it means is that we were anticipating spending X and we spent less than X, and that money goes back to the taxpayer in any number of mechanisms, including what Enrique had just shared. So that's super important for people to understand how the dollars get accounted. And I'll go back a couple of years ago, we had a state controller audit, and the state controller came in because it was on the heels of Indian Point's announcement that they were closing. And basically they said, you need more reserves in order to not tax the community out of their house, Now, that was before we knew a lot about the cessation fund and some other mitigating efforts. So school districts need to have a bank account for a rainy day, because if it rains, we cannot overspend our budget. And we can't just unilaterally levy a tax at a random point in the school year because we say, oh, we under budgeted and we overspent. So this is critically important, because there is chatter out there about $5 million being hidden. That's nonsense. And I'm using those words very deliberately. We are a public entity. We're audited multiple times. Our books are open. We have an external audit every year. The controller's been in about every 3 years. Those are public documents that the board approves, and that we're demonstrating in a fiscally uncertain time, fiscal constraint and some responsibility, so that, as Enrique said, we don't have 1 year of a 1% tax increase and then have to make up for it the next 2 years with a 9% increase. We're trying to use the reserves to manage what we know could be some peaks and valleys. So I don't want to repeat everything, but it's critically important that folks understand how a district accrues a fund balance. And when you have an $80+ million budget, and you budget for your full liability, what you expect to spend, and if you come in under, that's not a bad thing, because those dollars are used to offset tax increases or to build programs for kids in the future.
And I want to add the fact that this is a business, but unlike any other business, in the sense that, let's say I'm in a regular business and I expend more, I can bring more revenue. In any other business, it's good times. I hire someone else because I know that my revenues are going to be greater. Here, I don't have that. I know my revenues, and I cannot overexpend because I don't have a way of paying it, because my revenues will never go up. They are set the day that the board sets the budget. So I cannot be tied like a corporation to say, okay, my income is going to be whatever it is, and if I bring more revenues, I can get more expenses. I cannot do that. So I cannot budget, for example, legal fees, 100,000, because if I have a lawsuit, even though in the past 3 years we have only spent 80,000, I cannot do it, because if I get a lawsuit and I have to pay another $40,000, I need to have that money because I don't have extra revenues. So that's what many people don't understand about school districts. You cannot add revenues during that school year. April, when the board votes for the budget, my revenues are set. I might make a couple of hundreds or $1,000 by selling equipment, by anything like that. But at the end of the day, they are set. I know for good that I'm going to get X amount of money. No matter what happens, that's the difference between a school district and a regular business. In a regular business, you don't have your revenue set. I do. I don't have to go out and sell more gadgets. I don't have to do anything, because I know that if the board approves $82 million, I'm going to get $82 million. But if there's a problem and I need to expend more than 82 million, I can't, because I cannot raise more revenues. So that's why the fund balance is so important.
Bill, you have a question?
Yes, Enrique, on this schedule, the unassigned fund balance looks like it gets quite low in the last 4 years on this schedule. What was our typical, I'm referring to the unassigned fund balance specifically. what did we typically have that at pre-Entergy announcing their withdrawal? Because it looks like it's getting
Yes,
very low in those last 4 years of this.
getting very tight. Usually we had it at 3% of the budget. So let's say it was about $2 million. At one point during 2011, when the economy was doing very poorly, we were at 500,000. That's the lowest we've been since I've been here. But I will say that about 3% has been of the following budget has been the average. So if you take into account back then that it was a $70 million budget, we were about $2 to $2.1 million.
Okay, so even though we're going through this long-range planning, and right now it looks like there's sufficient fund balance, when you do the long-range planning, it's getting tight towards the end.
Very tight. However, this is a however, Bill. I'm being very conservative. For me, in these projections, I have, starting on 2025, 26, only $2.2 million of pilot payments from Holtec Energy from Indian Point. That number can triple, but that's the number that we have today, and that's the number that I'm using.
And we're anticipating and hoping for a lot more than that, correct?
That's what I'm saying. I'm anticipating 10 million, maybe 8, but definitely more than 2. And let's say that it's 5. You're talking $3 million more in fund balance starting in 26, 27.
Okay, so there's, although this is a good projection,
it's
just that, a projection, and there's a lot of variables to be determined. Stay tuned.
Yes, and again, there's 2 reasons why I like to do it like that. Reason number 1 is because I like to be conservative. I prefer to have the surprise to the upside and to the downside. And second, because that was the only part that the state controller disagreed with me, even though I explained why, and I explained that some of the maturities of our bonds were coming down. They like, and I understand as a government entity, to be as conservative as possible, and that's what I did here.
Thank you, Enrique.
Any other comments or questions? I'm sorry, Enrique.
Sorry, that's you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Enrique. I think we can move on to our next presentation.
That it's me again. Greg, please, my next presentation. Joe and I wanted to discuss also with the board and with the community about contingent budget, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about what contingent budget is. The last time we were in contingent budget, I wasn't even in the district. It was 2 years before I came to the district, so it was 2006. So probably most of the families that have children in the district, they never went through any contingent budget, so they don't understand what it is. And I want to explain to everyone, definitely no one, maybe Mary Pat was in the board back then, but I think she was the only one, if anything, if anyone, what a contingent budget means, because everyone needs to understand it to see how detrimental to the education of our children will be. So there's certain rules under contingent budget. First of all, we cannot rent equipment, we cannot rent computers. So basically our leases that we do every year are gone. Rental of office equipment, we do very little. Outside organizations are not allowed except when there is no cost to the district. That it never happens, because even if it's the custodian spending half an hour cleaning behind it, then it's not allowed. So all these organizations that use our facilities, they won't be able to use it. Capital expenditures are forbidden except in an emergency. Uniforms are prohibited, and every year we buy uniforms for athletics. We also have a cycle, like for example, this year, after 7 years, we're buying the uniforms for the football team. That would not be possible next year. Purchase of equipment is not allowed. And finally, the administrative component of the contingency budget is capped at the percentage of last year. In that sense, as it is today, we're below, so we will have to go to also administrative, but even today we're below last year. So how do we calculate contingent budget? We look at last year's approved tax levy. To that number, we add this year's non-property tax revenues, and that gives us our contingent budget. So for example, last year we approved a levy of $46,348,822. To that number, we add the non-property tax revenue of this year, $35.8 million, and that gives us $82.2 million, the maximum that we can spend under contingent. Next. So on the left, you have our proposed budget that the board approved a couple of weeks ago. And our proposed, and you can see here non-property tax revenue, the $35.8 million from last slide. And here you can see our proposed budget of $84 million, our proposed tax levy of 43, and our tax cap of 53. That tax cap doesn't matter in this case. Now, our contingent budget will be the $35.8 million, and plus the tax levy of $48 million from last year, which gave us a contingent budget of $82 million, which means that we will need to reduce $2 million, close to $2.1 million in expenses to get to the contingent budget. Any questions?
Allie.
So under the regulations, the rental of office equipment, is that no new leases, or will we have to cancel our existing lease contract?
No, we cannot cancel. All our obligations from the past stay there, but the new lease that we are planning to do next year for Laura to buy Chromebooks, we cannot buy the Chromebooks.
Okay, and then for the second one, the outside organizations, those are like the scouts and the sports and
PYA and even the town of Portland.
Oh, okay. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I think it would help. I'm sorry. I would think it might help if you're looking at cutting $2 million if we went to contingency. What would you do to cut that, to make that gap? What would you what would be something? Would you let teachers go? How would you make up that shortfall?
Wait, before we get to that,
Just
can we
so
talk?
people,
No, I know.
so people understand what's at stake.
Right. So can we, let's talk about our options if the budget was voted down.
Exactly.
We don't have to go right to contingent. What are our other options? And then if we took those other options, what would we?
Our main budget goes down, the board can decide to put a second budget that gets voted at I think the third Tuesday in June. The same budget, cut expenses to that budget. It's up to them. Last time that this happened in the district, the year before I came, they put the board decided to put the same budget. The budget was voted down again, and then we had to go to contingent. In this case, it can be, we have two options: put another budget or go directly to contingent. We will never recommend the board to go directly to contingent. We will recommend the board to make some cuts, and we're not ready there. We are not ready to recommend any cuts because we're.
I understand that, but I think to give people an idea of if we went to contingent, what would we be facing? What changes would have to happen besides like?
Let me just explain our budget very, very generally. We are a service industry, so you can imagine about 75 to 80% of our total expenses are in human beings, meaning the staff. So you can imagine out of $82 million, about $66 million go to benefits and salaries. Materials and supplies represents $1 million. Not even $1 million, but let's say $1 million. Utilities, gas, oil, transportation, that's the rest. I cannot cut, these cuts will not be on materials and supplies. I can promise you that. We can cut materials and supplies or textbooks. We can cut 200,000-300,000. We're talking here teachers. Our average teacher with benefits makes about $120,000. So if we need to cut about $2 million, we need to cut about 15 teachers. That's basically where between teachers, principals, you cannot cut any principals in the elementary schools because there's one per elementary school. Maybe you can cut one in the middle school. I'm talking here, the bottom line is teachers. Teachers is what we need to cut because without principals, you cannot manage a school. Without a superintendent, you can't do it. Without a business manager, you can do it. So at the end of the day, it's teachers. This means the only thing that contingent budget means is bigger class size, period. Nothing else. Coming out of COVID, I think it will be extremely detrimental to our children. Corey, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. So last year, there was the potential that if the budget was voted down, there was no opportunity for a second vote.
No.
So is that an issue this year again, that could potentially happen?
Last year is like this year. There were two alternatives, either go directly to contingent or decrease the budget.
No, but there was something last year where I think that they were saying we weren't going to be allowed the whole second vote.
Because of COVID, originally they said that there was going to be no second vote, but I think that at the end the governor changed his mind and said yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what happened. Is
Yes,
there any mention of that?
You are correct. You are correct.
Okay. So
Originally,
for this year, is there any potential of that?
no. We haven't heard anything. I'll say no.
Okay.
Last year, the governor went back and say, no way, you know, got too much pressure, so I don't think he will change. And this year, I think I haven't heard anything else, is that the budget is going to be a regular budget in person.
Correct. The vote will take place in person.
Yep.
Yeah, what was a little different last year, and Corey and Enrique are exactly right. We had this conversation last year, and someone asked the question, if the budget fails, where do you cut? And it was almost verbatim. In addition, you also look at what your non-mandated programs and services are. Yeah, kindergarten, as crazy as this sounds, kindergarten is not a mandated service for school districts in New York State. If you look at our elective programs that are middle school and high school, they're not mandated. The only thing that's mandated is that kids in high school have to have elective credit in those areas, but certainly not the offerings and the opportunities we provide. Athletics, our extracurricular clubs and activities, those are all not mandated activities. We take them for granted because they're the fabric of our community or any school community, but we would have to look there too, because we can't cut programs that New York State says students need to experience.
Thank you.
I believe that COVID is going to be an excuse or a reason to get an absentee ballot, though. Is that correct? Where people
I haven't heard anything. I don't know if, Joe, you have heard anything about how this year the budget vote is going to work.
Yeah, I'll let Carmen chime in. She's been working on this. I can tell you that the vote will be in person. However, anyone can, with enough notice and going through the process, can basically order an absentee ballot. But I'll let Carmen talk about that briefly.
Hi, yes. So this year, we're going to have a normal vote, but people can choose to get an absentee ballot. They do have to fill out an absentee ballot application first and send it to me. And if it's because of COVID, there's a temporary illness checkbox that they'll need to check. And then I will send them out an absentee ballot. Any other questions, Lisa?
Question for you, Carmen. What about somebody who's away at school who normally gets an absentee ballot? Do you send those automatically, or what happens there?
Same process like as years in past. They send an application in and they temporary out of.
So they still have to request it. They have to request it every year. You're
still have to send an application. Yes, they still have to send an application in to me.
Okay.
Carmen, where are those applications available?
They are on the right now on the website under voter information, or they can call me and I can mail them one.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions on the contingent budget? Any other comments? All right, thank you very much, Enrique, for that very clear explanation.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we will do a 180 and move from talking about programs that may need to be reduced if the budget fails to programs we are excited to potentially offer for the first time in our school district. As we reported a couple weeks ago, in the enacted budget is the opportunity for school districts to participate in pre-K funding, to receive pre-K funding and to either build their own pre-K program or to partner with existing credentialed and approved pre-K programs in the community. So Margaret and I and Lisa are going to join in and walk everyone through, maybe just me and Margaret, I know Lisa's working on this in the background. We'll walk you through what is in the budget, the potential dollars that could come to Hendrick Hudson, and the opportunity to offer pre-K to our 4-year-olds. So Greg, go ahead. So I'll start. In this budget, New York State added $90 million for pre-K for the 700 plus districts throughout the state. And for the first time ever, Hendrick Hudson is identified as receiving funds. We may be able to, we are permitted, in addition to using the state set aside funds for pre-K, a school district could also always at any time use existing dollars to supplement pre-K. What that means, and just forecasting a couple slides ahead, is that while we're going to receive or eligible to receive around $180,000, if we chose to expand our program on our own, we're permitted to do that. We would be permitted to use district resources to offer more seats, as the state says, rather than just the minimal amount that comes from the funding. So that's a misnomer. I want to make sure that people understand that not all school districts have pre-K that is entirely funded by the state. Some school districts use their own dollars to supplement funding for pre-K because they believe in it. We've heard Lisa earlier today talk about the academic or social emotional needs that students who are 4 years old that are coming to us in kindergarten. We know that that's a trend in our community. It's a trend in New York State schools. Also, many pre-Ks were closed last year because of COVID. So while some families may have traditionally leaned on pre-K to jumpstart their child's educational career, many of them did not, were not open last year. So certainly we have seen a trend with students entering our school and going through our pre-K, our kinder camp in the summer that have some specific needs. And Margaret, if you want to expound on any of that.
So, we know just by our own experiences that children come to us from a wide variety of opportunity. The term pre-K is often loosely used and can be something very richly experiential, or it can be almost a babysitting service with kids barely paid attention to. And I, as a former kindergarten teacher and former pre-K teacher, I can tell you that as kindergarten folks, we know firsthand what our kids are coming to us with. And those kindergarten rooms often have the widest gaps in instruction. I actually just today spoke informally with two people who were lamenting at how far apart some of their children were in terms of just book handling understandings. So that's a gap that we'd love to close. We've been talking about it for a long time. I think on one of our calls, Joe, was interesting that some of our staff also did not fully understand that universal pre-K does not fund the entire program that a district puts forth. As Joe said, our allocation is $183,000 in parentheses, 34 half-day slots. Well, $183,000 is not really a lot of money when you consider staffing that has to go into the model. You have to have obviously a full-time certified teacher, a teacher aide. There are restrictions about class size that are imposed by the state that the district would have to write variances for. We need classroom space. Despite all of what seem to be challenges, this is a very significant opportunity for our community. You want to go to the next slide? So there's our allocation. Now, what is still a question for us, and that I'm trying to work on, is am I permitted to use some of the Title I funding that the district receives to expand on the allocation that you're looking at right now? So there are different pots of money that we can potentially apply to this if we decide to move forward with it. I'm waiting for someone up at NYSID to get back to me and explain very clearly what we can, if we can, utilize additional funding streams to expand potentially the 34 seats that are slotted, and obviously be able to fully prepare for students to come, whether it be this September or next September. Next slide. So building the program, the district actually has a requirement to put out an RFP, a request for proposals, with local pre-Ks to partner with them. We would set aside 10% of our allocation for the existing pre-Ks to fund slots in those particular schools for our students. It would be within our district boundaries. And there are certain requirements that would have to be met on both ends. There are curriculum agreements that we would have to come to terms on. There may or may not be some religious concerns. So we're still exploring, as Joe mentioned, exactly what this needs to look like. I've had a few phone calls with districts that have long-standing pre-K programs to kind of learn from them what are the things you need to be prepared to do and what are the things you need to make sure you avoid doing. We're looking at potentially housing 2 classrooms, which with an AM/PM program would provide us with 4 sections of pre-K, up to 17 in a class. And I believe actually that with 17 in a class, it would be 1 teacher and 1 teacher's aide. If you go over that, you need to write a variance or add another teacher aide for the existing program. You want to add anything to that, Joe?
I was muted, sorry. The opportunity here is really significant. As Margaret mentioned, we do an RFP, perhaps we have community partners, but it would be really dynamic depending on the situation and depending on the potential situation of the partners. If the pre-K program affiliated with us or partnering with an agency could be housed in our elementary schools, kids then could learn the rules of school at 4 years old. They're identifying classrooms, they're meeting a principal, they're in a flow, they're in a routine. I have been part of school districts where pre-K students participate in art, phys ed, music, that they are really part of the K-12 experience. It's a pre-K. The teachers collaborate with each other, staff development for pre-K. So there really is the potential to increase, as Margaret said, increase our reach and bring more students and families into the organization earlier.
Right. Greg?
Next slide, Greg.
So this is exactly what we're exploring. If we use Title I money, how does that govern the seats that we put forth? And then what happens with the resulting seats? In many districts, these are, I spoke to somebody that it was first come, first serve, another district where is lotteried. And then considering the outfitting of the 2 classrooms, the opportunity to include busing, which would naturally include a midday drop-off, working with local partners. We have identified that right now we are aware of approximately 75 to 80 students who would turn 4 by next December 1st, who are potential candidates for a pre-K program if we move forward with September 21. Well, we understand that not every one of those students might be interested in participating in that program for a variety of reasons based on family needs. But that right now is the number that we have. There are obviously many more children that we would be potentially drawing from that we are not right now aware of, the same situation that we face each year as we ramp up for the incoming kindergarten.
Can I just ask one question? Do any of the other districts do it based on financial need?
Title I is what would drive the financial need aspect of this. So I have a phone call with one more district to see how they manage or commingle funds, but I'm actually more interested in relying on the state to give us guidance with that.
So this Title I money is not existing money that we already receive. if we had this program, we would get additional funding. Is that
No,
correct?
the Title I money is the money that we currently receive, and we would be able to allocate it for pre-K seats. We would have to identify how many seats, and we would have to prove to the state, and obviously it's federal funding, that that title money paid for, let's say, 35 seats, and I can show you the 35 students who qualified for Title I funding that took those seats.
But then you're taking away from other programs that use Title I funding if you're reallocating. Is that correct?
There would be some things that we are not doing, but one of them is Kinder Camp that we run every summer for incoming pre-K kids. So we believe that it would be money well spent when you look at the overall growth potential for kids who go to a sound preschool program.
I'm just trying to determine how much more we would be spending above and beyond the additional 183 and what programs we might be taking money from.
Right.
That's
And
because
that's what
the one
that's
thing
what-
we've all been talking about is saving money. And, you know, I think we said this a number of times, you know, the last thing we want to hear is about spending money on new programs. So if you're coming to us with a net zero proposal here, that's great. But if you're coming to us with additional expenses to offer the pre-K program, I think I at least personally would have a lot of problems with that, with everything else that's going on in the district financially.
Yeah,
And-
we're not at the proposal stage yet, Corey, because the last slide is we, along with the 148 or 150 districts that are now eligible for pre-K funding, are going to spend some time on April 28th to learn how this works, because they're widening the net. So certainly we'll report back and see what we can use the 183,000 for, how many students we could service. It's 34, who the potential partners may be. Depending on the RFP, it's usually a contract that the board would approve with an outside agency. We're talking with our neighboring districts of who are the outside agencies others use, if they even use them. There are districts that run the program entirely, you know, under their own roof because they now have the funding to do so.
Okay, but focusing on a net zero program, right? Net zero cost to the district.
No.
Can
I ask a question?
Me
I'm
too.
sorry, Corey, it's sort of piggybacking on Corey's. I don't understand, honestly, $183,000 is not a lot of money. You figure if it's 34 children, you need to have, that's at least 2 teachers and probably 2 aides, especially with little ones. So that's, you know, you've got to have certified teachers. That $183,000 right there before you buy them a box of crayons, that money is already spent. I mean, that doesn't even include how you would afford. I mean, that 183 would basically pay the salaries and benefits probably, and not have enough money, frankly, for 2 teachers, 2 teachers and 2 aides for these children. And that's assuming they don't have any other needs, or again, it wouldn't pay for a room. It wouldn't pay for the heat and electric in that room. It wouldn't, if you were allocating costs. I think it's a nice idea, but I don't see how that's feasible without supplementing it from our funding. 183,000 simply isn't enough money to run for 34 children. It's not enough money. So I just would be curious to know where the balance would be coming from, because I don't see how it could possibly be a net sum, just a zero balance, like a complete wash. Again, these kids are going to need more than just a teacher in the room. They're going to need, all the school supplies, and they're going to need resources, and they're going to probably need, additional assistance in terms of, monitors and people helping, and that doesn't even touch the busing piece. So I don't understand where, I just don't think 183,000, it's a nice sum of money, but I don't see where that money is going to be able to create a program all of our own.
Well, that's what we're going to learn on the 28th. We're going to spend some time with the state education department. We're going to learn a little bit more of how that allocation came about, how they identified that we're eligible for 34 seats, and we'll need to map it out if we choose to go forward. It's our understanding at this time that that money can't be used for any other district expenses. So that money is a set aside for pre-K. And we also understand, again, this is before we learn more at the webinar, that if you don't use that funding, you're not eligible for it in future years. It may be one of those use it or lose it situations. So we're going to learn more on the 28th and study what our options are and see what other districts have been doing or what other districts plan to do now that this is afforded to them.
I have a question.
Lori, did you have a question?
I have a question. Right now, BV is a Title I school. How much money are we, I don't want to use the word saving by not having BV be a Title I school anymore?
The money follows the students, Lori. So those kids are always in our district. The money just follows them wherever they go. So for argument's sake, once we go Princeton plan in 22-23 and that demographic is dispersed across the 3 grade banded schools, the kids who are identified now either increase, or we don't know what that's going to look like in terms of percentages, the 2-3 school, the 4-5 school, and it'll level itself out.
So BV just didn't get, I know that they get it per child, but BV didn't get any as a school?
They are school-wide programs, so he gets funded first. And because they're school-wide, they have really a wide range of options about how they can use their funding.
So that's what I mean. So I know that it follows children, but so the amount that BV was getting in general, isn't there a separate amount that the school gets simply by being a Title I school?
They get a percentage of what the district gets as a whole. Every one of our schools is given a percentage of the funding that we receive as a district. So they get the largest percentage because they're the only title school in the building. It ranges from, I'm not going to remember exactly what his percentage was, maybe 40 something percent. And then the next school under that was Frank G, Blue Mountain, the high school, and Furnace Woods last. But there are percentages, and the way that you fill out the grant and determine what you're using that money for, you likely end up with a school, and I'll use Furnace Woods because they're the smallest percentage, where they're not getting anything from Title I, even though they do have a percentage of children. That burden falls to the district to pick up. So when we run AIS programs, there are programs for kids who require support at Furnace Woods that the district pays for out of its general fund because we've exhausted the Title I money because it's required to be funded that way through the formula. So the first thing that happens is that BV gets the cut that they need. And then with Josh, well, with all the principals, we determine what we're going to do with that funding.
Okay, so my question would be, if they're not getting that funding, are we thinking of using that to supplement pre-K?
Well, yes, that's what we just said, that we need to find out from the feds through the state exactly how that funding can be now applied to a potential pre-K program.
But that's an addition to the 183.
Yes, that's a separate amount of money that we get in title funding every year, right?
But doesn't that mean you're taking it away from another program to apply it towards pre-K? Like, I'm not understanding that. If we get a pot of money, that pot of money is going towards expenses that we've got to pay. If you're now shifting it somewhere else, who's going to pick up those expenses? There's no wash there.
It depends on how much funding we determine to set aside for the pre-K program. They may tell us that, for argument's sake, if we get $200,000 in Title I, they may say you can only apply $150,000 towards your pre-K program. We don't know the answers to that yet. That's why we're doing the webinar.
But wouldn't we have applied that $200,000 towards other programs in the district to offset costs?
We used it to support an after-school program for kids who are in need. We would do that during the day.
So they would go away, right?
No, they wouldn't necessarily go away. And I'll give you an example. So we've run after-school programs for reading at the elementary level for many years. Together with Josh and Donna and Cindy, as we examined data, we recognized that it wasn't making any difference for our kids. Nobody was getting better. The attendance was so sporadic that it just wasn't worth it. Josh is a title building. He can use his money for every student in the building, even though they're not all classified as Title I students. He took his money 2 years ago, 1920, and instead of running the after-school program, he brought in professional development to enhance the core instruction in reading. That was how he determined to use his money. Donna took a small portion of her money and she did some of that as well, some coaching with some of her primary teachers. So it's always a give and take because none of this grant money really covers all of the expenses that we incur. But we still have an obligation to make sure kids get what they need. So again, I don't know if they'll let me use any of it, all of it. That's what we're waiting to see if we can find out. And then we have to make the determination, as all of you have just said, if we have $300,000, I'm just pieing in the sky here, to throw at this program, is that enough to make a go of it? Do we restrict the number of seats and go at it differently?
I need to paraphrase what you said, Margaret, because it sounds like we will not be able to implement other programs that we had if we repurpose this money for pre-K. That's what it sounds like, because the principals had the option to put that money towards students, towards programs, things that are needed with the students that we have. If they no longer have those funds, they will not be able to do those things for the students because it's going to pre-K. Because it's not a wash.
Okay, so what I'm saying to you is two things really, Corey. One thing is we have always used general fund money to fund some of these programs because there's just not that kind of money in title grants. The second thing is we have to look at this opportunity, if we choose to, as a long-term investment in our kids. So if we're ever going to get out of the need to have AIS during school, after school, we have to look at how we're facing instruction during the day differently. That's why we've done so much.
And we would have to look, we would need a business case to show if we're going to implement this program, these are the costs that are going to be reduced in the future because of implementing this program, right? That's a business case. What you're saying right now, which we don't have what we have in front of us right now sounds to me like we're robbing from Peter to pay Paul to get this pre-K done, right? And we don't.
Yes.
It does feel that way.
Talking about this.
What I'm saying is that you say that in the short term because you're looking down the road at long-term gains.
Okay, so what I would need to see personally, what are the long-term gains? You're telling me we're going to be able to cut AIS. So let's say we get 183,000 from the state, but we have to kick in another 300,000 to get all the seats and to get the staffing, whatever the case is. I would want to see $300,000 in cost benefit within the next year or two, right? Or over the long term, or maybe, it's going to be compounded over a certain number of years. But otherwise, we're talking about impacting everybody's taxes again. I just, we need to see a business case that shows us net zero or some sort of benefit.
We are nowhere near that level, Corey.
Okay.
The state came out and said, Hendrick Hudson, for the first time ever, you're going to receive state funding to offer pre-K, a set aside, not in foundation aid where we could spend it on replacing the lights or buying new uniforms, only designated for pre-K. Yep. Yes, it's only 34 seats. It's, maybe it's, AM, PM program. We don't know that.
Right.
What we also know is before the state allocated $180,000 for us, that districts have always been able to use title funds for pre-K if the district chose. That's not what we chose to do because we don't have enough Title I money to hire anybody to do anything remotely near a pre-K plan. All right. Now the state is giving us and other districts like us seed money to consider it because pre-K is one of the most statistically significant research-based interventions that impact student achievement. So the federal government and the state is spending a lot of money and directing a boatload of money to schools, $90 million more in New York State. We are nowhere near a plan, a proposal. We're going to learn more about this in 2 weeks on April 28th. We're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. We we are way out in front of our skis on this. What's exciting is that we qualify for pre-K money. Whatever the qualifications are, whatever the criteria are, we now meet it. We have $183,000 that I don't think we want to leave on the table for pre-K. Even if it's 17 kids every day or 34 kids, AM, PM, whatever the criteria are going to be, whatever the lottery to get kids in, I don't think we also want to leave money on the table. We also don't want to take money from a 5th grade program to pay pre-K, and I appreciate that. We are at the
And I'm 100% on board with you.
we are
Right?
exploring. That's
So
all.
exploring, if that's the case, that's
Yes.
fine. But that's not how this was presented, really, right?
Well, no, it was that we have the next slide, Greg, if you could go to the next slide. On April 28th, we'll learn more about the operating aid, supplemental funding, so on and so forth. All right. We're merely saying that for the first time ever, the school district receives pre-K money. We're also saying that we receive Title I money, and districts do use Title I money for pre-K. And I would assume, Corey, that every other district that's having this conversation, there is someone like you saying, wait a minute, if we're going to now take away funding for summer camp, after school, or paying for reading help and direct it toward pre-K, exactly what you said, that we're eliminating one program to fund another. No one wants to do that. But we need to explore what the potential is and what the other funding sources are, because for the first time ever, we have almost $200,000 to engage 4-year-olds in our school district with pre-K that would be free of charge to those families.
Right.
That's it.
Right. In which case, the financial need, I think, should be a primary consideration if we think about doing this.
And that's
Yes.
what we need. That's what we need to learn in terms of what the priorities are, what students have, whatever, first refusal, for a lack of a better term.
Right.
But this is very, very new to us. This has never happened to Hendrick Hudson, and it's exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time, but we have more questions than answers. So we're not committing any money. We're not hiring any people. We're not moving money from one pot to another to support this. We're going to learn, we're going to study it, and we're going to come back to you folks and determine if this is a worthy endeavor.
Okay. Thank you for putting it like that.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Alex, did you have a question still?
I have several, but it sounds like they can be tabled until we talk about this again and Joe and Margaret have more information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any last minute questions on this? All right, thank you very much, Joe and Margaret. And we're looking forward to hearing more about this after the webinar and sometime in the near future. That brings us to our next audience comment section, which is an audience comment section on agenda items specifically. Carmen, do you have any audience comments?
Sorry, I just had to unmute. Yes, can you hear me, Carol? Just want to make sure you can
Yes,
hear
I
me.
can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. We had one that came in from Janet Malong, and that was on Monday, April 12th. Dear Mr. Hawkwriter, Board and District Clerk, in that you have voted that there will not be district-wide informational mailing, I'm submitting some questions that I asked you to respond to. I read some of the information on the website as you suggested, and I was interested to learn that there is relatively little research on frequent early childhood transitions to new schools. Also, I request that my attached letter be read at the board meeting. Since your board meeting on April 7th, I have worried and wondered at your vote and decision to not supply the public with vital information about the Princeton plan. I suggested in my previous letter to you that you were not prepared to make the decision on how best to address the educational needs of the youngest children of the Hendrick Hudson School District. Believe it or not, you might even benefit from listening to the taxpayers of the district. Your decision to advance the plan when a public hearing is not possible is self-serving. I have several questions and concerns I would like to have addressed in writing, either by the superintendent or the board president, and I request that this letter be read at your board meeting. How do you plan to handle the following? Any child entering kindergarten in 2021 in a school that will be either 2-3 or 4-5 school in 2022 will be required to change schools in 2022 for first grade and again in 2023 for second grade. Same situation will exist for any child entering second grade in 2021 in a school that will not be in a 2-3 school in 2022. These children will be subjected to more school changes than seems educationally or emotionally sound. Having multiple years when they are in school for only 1 year before having to switch to a new school. Our second question is, when will you have a plan to implement the plan? When will the community be aware of the school assignments so that families and their children can be prepared? What is the cost of implementing the Princeton plan? There will be costs to outfit the school buildings, purchase buses and fuel, and hire additional drivers, provide costly special services in each building, pay for increased insurance fees, etc. Will additional staff be needed to conduct the studies you spoke about to evaluate the effectiveness of your plan? Why have you not examined redistricting and compared costs? The next question is, what will the tax increase be? Why will the tax increase be 4.5% when the change in program isn't for another year and the district is receiving $8.4 million for the upcoming school year and $65 million over 8 years from the New York State Electric Generation Cessation Mitigation Program? Also, the budget for the 2021 is outside the tax cap when you have an additional $11 million in the reserve fund, 4 times what is allowed by law. I look forward to your correspondence. Sincerely, Janet Malong. That was the only comment we received.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Ms. Malong. I think some of your questions were answered this evening, and the rest Mr. Hochreiter can get back to you about. All right, so that brings us to our last section, our board comments and new business. Any new business from the board?
I have a question. At what point, Carmen read a letter tonight, and it seems like people are unaware that, you know, the technology has evolved that we can now, that they can call in. Is there going to be some sort of, how will people know this, that they can actually call in and be able to essentially represent themselves and not have Carmen have to read their letters or have some sort of, have their say? Will they be notified? I mean, how are that, you know, we got a text today saying that this is possible, or a couple of days ago. When will people, you know, the people who really want to know, when will they be notified?
So I can answer that. The process to participate in the Zoom, like we had before, was notified on our board agenda, put on our website, and we did a separate notice on our website. In the case of the individual who provided the letter tonight, she was offered an opportunity to speak and declined. She asked that Carmen
Well, I
read her
actually
letter.
got an email today from somebody who actually said, who asked me about this, you know, like just saying, and he can't even find stuff on the website. He's, you know, because that was his question. When will he find out about who's running, who's this? This is somebody who's struggling to find things on the website. And he said that there was, you know, he looked at the agenda. He didn't get the impression that he had the opportunity for any sort of input. And I don't think it's really, you know, widely known. I don't know if, you know, if anybody's heard back. I do believe that, I think if it was more widely known, I honestly think we might have heard from some people tonight. You know, especially given the fact that you were doing a presentation on the Princeton plan. So I do think there needs to be some sort of effort to, you know, so that people know that they actually can, you know, I don't know if we're ever going to meet again. There's ever going to be an open meeting, but there's got to be, now that this is a possibility, I think we've got to make a huge effort to let people know that this is an option rather than just, you know, having their emails read. So perhaps there's a better way than just, you know, putting it on the web, you know, like, I don't know where you put it on the website, but, you know, maybe making it a little more obvious.
All right, thank you, Mary Pat. I think that helped to advertise it very nicely as well.
No, but it'd be nice if, but if nobody's listening, I mean, it's still, if nobody's listening, they don't know. There's got to be a better way to get people knowing these things besides just sort of, there's got to be a better way. You know,
Can we post it on social media? I mean, I 100% agree with Mary Pat. I think, we have to let people know if they're sending in letters, we should respond to them right away. We're inviting you to present your letter and read your letter at the next meeting. Let's put it on social media, on our district website, make it very prominent. If you want to participate in the meeting, here's the process you need to go through. And
People have been begging for this. They've
Yeah.
been begging for this.
So let me answer the question. It's on social media. It's on our Facebook page. It's the first story on our website. So if you go to our website, you'll see under news items, I'm on it right now on the main page, information on the board meeting. And it will tell you there how you can participate. In fact, it's it's the first story. It's in the commentary in what Carmen puts out for the board meeting notice. So if anyone is reading that to understand how to submit their email, I think the next sentence, Carmen, says to notify you by noon and that you would be invited into the Zoom to participate. The individual who submitted a letter tonight, Carmen, called and said you can participate live, and she chose not to. She actually asked Carmen to read it. So
I don't think I see it on the district webpage on Facebook. I just see a notification about the board meeting, nothing about.
and if you click on that, I guess the main paragraph right in the middle says email Carmen Koch, must be received by noon. Individuals submitting comments will be provided access to enter the meeting via Zoom and provided 3 minutes to read their comments.
That's on the Facebook, Hendrick
That's on
Hudson
the- that's
School
on-
District Facebook?
That's on the website.
Right,
and I
right. I'm
believe-
talking about Facebook. You said it was posted on social media.
Yeah, if you go to Facebook, and I don't do Facebook, so I probably can't access this, but I'm on Facebook from our website. I'm looking at it. It was
I think that's where
posted
most people go.
It was posted at 7:31 yesterday morning. Click here for more details about the meeting, and I can't click on it, but if you click
Yeah,
on it,
but
it
there's
takes you-
nothing, I think what Mary Pat is saying, right? As in communications, if you want that to be your main thing, it's got to be before you have to click on anything else to go. Like our statement should say, hey, there's a board meeting. If you want to make a live statement, please contact Carmen Koch by this date, read more here, and then click, right? Because otherwise people are not going to know. And I think this is just, this is something that we could do better. I 100% agree with Mary Pat on this. And Facebook is probably the main media in social media for our district parents, if they're using social media. And then others are using email, and an email notification would be great also.
Ori, holy crap, I'm agreeing with you because that's been my thing for months now. If we can, so we're thinking like people who don't have children in the district would like to participate and they don't know what's going on and life is busy and they're not going to go onto the website. Why can't we get the emails?
You had to do 3 links to get that brings you back to the board, back to the exact article that you had to go through a link to get on the website. I mean, 3 links. You had to. It needs to be headlined. It shouldn't be like buried like in the 3rd paragraph and after like 2 commas. I mean, it needs to be a headline. And it's not. It's on Facebook, but it's the same. It says there's a Board of Ed meeting and click here for more details. It doesn't. It's not obvious, and it's not. If you're not, unless you are truly looking for it, you know it's coming. It's not. You're not going to know. It's not readily available, and it's not obvious, and it's not letting people know. It's just there hoping if people trip over it. It's not readily.
Can we just agree, Joe, to maybe get this done?
They've been begging for.
Yeah,
They've been begging for this. Why aren't we telling them about it?
All right, so let's make a more explicit
post, that it has to be in by noon is a problem too, because when we had live board meetings, which we should be still having, they were allowed to sign in at the meeting. They could sign in before the meeting. So some people are getting really teed off that they had to be in by noon. Like, why? Why can't it be by 6? Why does it have to be by noon? When we had live meetings, they were allowed to do it as they walked in. And
well, I could see logistically, like you want to cut it off at a certain time, because Greg's got to prepare to get people the access code to get in, and we've got to budget the time for them. We've got to tell them when they're coming on, when they should be prepared. And I think doing it very last minute, I think that could be a problem. But, you know, we could probably get it up to what, 2 p.m. before the meeting, and then make sure we still have enough time for logistics.
Or we could go live, since my kids in my classroom are 3 feet apart. We could go live. There's only 7 of us. We really could do it. Just saying.
Well, I think we are live.
No,
what do you
in
mean?
person, in person.
Wow.
So we're asking teachers to come into school. We're asking our kids to come into school. All my kids are in school. They've never been happier. Nice and safe. The CDC guidelines say 3 feet apart with a mask on. We could be 6 feet apart very easily. And then
Well,
we could have people come in.
We have 58 people watching now. I don't know where you've been.
And they could still watch. So we could still live stream it, and they could still watch from their homes.
Yeah, live streaming a group. We saw that when we tested that out. That just didn't work. Like that, people couldn't hear us. They couldn't see us. They couldn't understand what was going on. I think from a Zooming standpoint, this is leaps and bounds better than what we originally had from a streaming standpoint. So
I agree, but I think we should be back in person again. If we need to do something outside at a pavilion, I think we should do that too.
Well, the restrictions are changing on a weekly basis, so let's just keep our ears open and see what.
But the restrictions are right now that we can meet in person, and we're not doing it. They say that we can, so we can.
Other boards are doing it.
Yep. We should be doing it.
There are some boards that are and some boards that aren't, actually, just to clarify that. It's, you know, it's probably 50-50, maybe a little bit more.
It's doable though. It's not an inconceivable. It's doable if one wants to do it.
Right.
That's the key. You have to want to be able to do this and to, you know, and people want it too. So, but again, the board has to want to do this.
I think there are a lot of people that do like this format more.
Right. I mean, we've discussed this at board meetings before. We've looked at the monetary. We've talked about it. We can revisit it again. We can put it on an agenda at the next board meeting if you like. But we've had this discussion several times, and
it's always dismissed, though. It's always dismissed, and we never say, okay, let's do it. We're allowed to do it.
No, because
we are allowed to do it. My kids are in my classroom. We're 3 feet away from each other. We are adults. We could sit around a table and do this very nicely. I just don't get it. I don't understand.
I would like to say it, Lori, it's not dismissed. It's agreed to continue remote.
Right. Do you want to take a vote now? I mean, as to who wants to continue this way?
What a shame.
I just don't understand. We do this all the time. And I just don't understand. Our point, we're supposed to be talking to people. We're supposed to be communicating. And all we're doing is talking at them. We're talking at people. I mean, we finally get the opportunity to have the Zoom like back and forth. And it's not advertised appropriate, not sufficiently to get people, so that they're doing.
Okay, we will advertise this on a more explicit basis.
And people want to talk to us. They want to see us. This is so wrong. We are capable of doing this safely. And again, I don't know what the vaccination situation is for everybody. Again, as Lori said, we could do this outside. It's beautiful weather. It's like we could do this outside.
I think that the
safely.
audio logistics of doing this outside would be very difficult.
You know what?
That's not true.
There are ways we can work around this, and nobody wants to. Everybody's perfectly happy to tune in from their living room, or not everybody. Some people, or the majority are, and that's not adequate. It's not sufficient. You can say all you want. 58 people are listening. You know what? A bunch of them are probably tuned in and forgot to turn off, and they're listening as they're walking around doing laundry. They're not tuned in. They're like zipping in when they can, but they're not communicating, and they're just hearing people talk at them. They are not. There's no interaction here, and that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Correct.
It's not. They're supposed to be able to get their ideas across.
So Mary Pat, you keep saying there's no interaction. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but my understanding is the board meetings are supposed to be the work sessions for the board, and we're not supposed to be interacting with the public. We're allowed to listen to comments, but only the board president is able to respond to any of the comments, right? Am
And
I
do you feel
missing something
That's
on
do you
this?
correct.
feel that do you
Okay.
feel that the letters that we get that Carmen reads to us that somebody wrote is better than
No, I want, I
that-
told you, I'm very clear. I want people to be here. I think I've been asking for this for the past couple months. And if you see in some of the emails that I've sent, they haven't been so nice because we haven't gotten it done. And now we finally gotten it done, but we haven't really advertised it well. And I agree, we should be doing a better job advertising that. So I think we should be
100%.
hearing from people directly. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Mary Pat. What I'm disagreeing with you on is we as a board agreed that this is the way we're going to continue based on our votes. And we're getting a lot of positive reaction for the fact that people can tune in and listen and watch easily
But
rather than
so
have to
many
go out and
people that
not
are
hear
not
things
feel-
well.
They're not feeling heard, Corey. They're not. People are not sending an email on Tuesday afternoon to, for something. It's not reactive. It's not responsive. It's not, and then
That's not what I
basically
just said.
having
Mary Pat,
somebody
that's not
read
what
a
I said.
letter- Having somebody read a letter and Carol saying, "Oh, Joe or I will get back to you. Thank you very much," is not. There's got to be more than that. People.
Mary Pat,
want
I
more
agree
than
with
that.
you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't understand why we're still talking about this, right? They said that they would change the social media, and I'm agreeing with you. So I don't know why you're still arguing with me.
Because we're doing this from our living rooms and nobody leaves their home, Corey, and it's important for us to see people face to face. I firmly believe that it's important to see the people whose lives we're making decisions for, that we should see them and we should get a feel for it. Somehow getting it in a letter that Carmen is reading to us is not the same thing. Just saying.
Okay, we
And
have,
now that-
we have Zoom capability. I think we're saying the same thing over and over again. Can I have a motion to close the meeting, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Our next meeting is on May 5th, and that will be a Wednesday. Thank you very much.